couple of prep schools, including a persistent one in Massachusetts. Things were changing for me, too. My private therapy practice was going pretty well. For the first time in years, my life had nothing official to do with law enforcement. I was out of the loop. Well, almost anyway. I did have a certain senior homicide detective in my life, Brianna Stone, also known as The Rock, if you ask some of the detectives who worked with her. I'd met Bree at a retirement party for a cop we both knew. We spent the first half hour that night talking about the job, and the next few hours talking about ourselves. Kind of crazy things like her race hand release as a peddler on the Dragon Boat racing team. By the end of the night, I barely had to ask her out. In fact, as I think about it now, she might have asked me. But then one thing led to another, and I went home with Bree that night, and we never looked back. And yes, I think Bree asked me to come home with her that night, too. Bree was fully in control of herself, intense, in all the good ways, and none of the bad. And it didn't hurt that she seemed to have a natural chemistry with the kids. They dug her. She was, in fact, right now, chasing Ali at Olympic speed through the first floor of the house on 5th Street, roaring like the child-eating alien she had apparently become, while Ali used a Star Wars lightsaber to keep her at bay. "That sword can't hurt me," she shouted. "Prepare to eat carpet." Bree and I didn't stick around on 5th Street too long on that particular morning, though. To be honest, if we had stayed there, I probably would have been forced to sneak her upstairs to show her my non-existent etchings. Or maybe my lightsaber. For the first time since we'd been going out, we had managed to synchronize our schedules for a few days away. I went out the front door loudly singing the end of Stevie Wonder's very first hit, Fingertips Part 2. I winked at Bree and pecked her cheek. "Always leave 'em laughing," I said. "Or at least confused," she said, and winked back. Our destination, Catoctin Mountain Park in Maryland, was on the eastern rampart of the Appalachian Mountains, not too far from Washington and not too close either. The mountains were perhaps best known as the site of Camp David, but Bree knew about a campground open to mere mortals like us. I couldn't wait to get there and be alone with her. I could almost feel the thrum of D.C. move out of my head as we headed north. The windows of my R350 were down, and as always I was loving the ride of this marvelous vehicle. Best buy I'd made in a long time. The great Jimmy Cliff wailed on the stereo. Life was pretty good right at the moment. Hard to beat. As we zipped along, Bree had a question. "Why the Mercedes?" "It's comfortable, yes?" "Very comfortable." I touched the gas. "Responsive. Quick." "Okay, I get the point. But most important, it's safe. I've had enough danger in my life. I don't need it on the road." At the park entrance, as we were paying for the site, Bree leaned across me to speak to the ranger on duty. "Thanks a lot. We'll be respectful to your park." "What was that about?" I asked Bree as we pulled away. "What can I say? I'm an environmentalist." The campsite was definitely spectacular and worthy of our respect. It sat on its own little point of land with shimmering blue water on 3 sides and nothing but dense forest greenness looming behind. In the far distance, I could see something called Chimney Rock, which we planned on hiking the next day. What I couldn't see was a single other person. Just the one that mattered, Bree, who happened to be the sexiest woman I'd ever known. Just the sight of her got me going, especially out here on our own. She took hold of me around the waist. What could be more perfect than this? I couldn't think of anything that would spoil our weekend up here in the woods. Chapter 4.
The story, the thriller, continued. 48 hours after his rehearsal, his flawless walkthrough, Yusuf Qasim returned to the Riverwalk apartment building with its wealthy and careless American tenants. This wasn't practice, though. It was the real thing, and his stomach was queasy. This was a truly big day for him and for his cause. Sure enough, at 4:34 p.m. the door to the service entryway opened, and the same tall black porter lethargically lugged his garbage bags to the street. Old Black Joe, Qasim thought. Still in chains. Nothing really changes in America, does it? Not in hundreds of years. Less than 5 minutes later, Qasim was upstairs on the 12th floor, standing outside the apartment of a woman named Tess Olson. This time he rang the bell. Twice. He had been waiting for this moment for such a long time. Months. Maybe all his life, if he was honest with himself. Yes, Tess Olson's eye flickered behind the peephole of 12F. Who is it? Yusef Qasim made sure she saw his coveralls and the cap that said M.O. No doubt he would look like any other brown-skinned maintenance worker to this woman, someone who was supposed to notice details in her profession. She was a well-known crime writer after all, and that was important for the story, a crucial detail.
Mrs. Olsen, there is gas leak in your apartment. Someone call you from office?
What? Say again? His accent was impossibly thick, and English seemed to be torture for him. He spoke slowly, like some kind of idiot.
Gas leak. Please, Mrs., I can't fix leak. Someone call. Tell you I come.
I just got home. No one called, she said. I don't know anything about it. I don't think there was a message. I suppose I can check.
You like me come back later, fix gas leak then? You smelling gas?
The woman sighed, with the unconcealed exasperation of a person with too many trivial duties and not enough hired help. Oh, for God's sake, she said. Come in then, hurry it up. Your timing is just exquisite. I have to finish getting dressed and be out of here in 20 minutes. At the click of the deadbolt, Yusef Qasim readied himself. The moment the woman cracked the door and he saw both her eyes, he charged forward. Extreme force was unnecessary in this case, physically speaking, but it had great utility. Tess Olson fell back several steps and then thumped down hard on her behind. She came right out of her high-heeled pumps, exposing bright red toenails and long bony feet. Before her shock and surprise gave way to a scream, Qasim was on top of her, pressing against her chest with his full body weight. The rectangle of silver duct tape he'd stuck to his pants leg was transferred quickly to the woman's mouth. He put the tape on hard, to show that he meant business, and that she would be foolish to resist.
I mean you no harm,
he said, the first of many lies. Then he flipped her onto her stomach and pulled a red dog leash from his pocket. The leash was a key part of the plan. It was inexpensive nylon mesh, but more than strong enough. The leash was a clue, and just the first that he would leave here for the police, and for whoever else became interested. The woman was maybe 40, hair dyed blonde, not physically strong, in spite of the fact that she seemed to work out to keep herself thin. He showed her something now. A box cutter. Very nasty-looking tool. Convincing. Her eyes widened.
Get up, you weak coward, he said, close to her ear, or I will cut your face in ribbons.
He knew that the softness of his voice was more threatening than any shouting could be. Also, the fact that his English had suddenly improved would confuse and frighten her. When she tried to rise, he startled her with a sharp grab at the back of her scrawny neck. He stopped her right there, still on all fours. That's quite far enough, Mrs. Olsen. Don't move, not another inch. Be very still. Very still. I'm using the box cutter now. Her expensive black dress fell away as he cut it down the back. Now she trembled uncontrollably and tried to scream from behind her gag. She was prettier without her clothes. Firm. Somewhat appealing, though not to him. Don't worry, I am no dog-style fucker. Now go forward on your knees. Do as I say. This won't take much of your busy day. She only moaned in response. It took the heel of Yusef's shoe at her backside to get the idea across. Then finally she began to crawl.
"How do you like it?" he asked. "Suspense. Isn't that what you write about? That's why I'm here, you know. Because you write about crime in your books. Can you solve this one?"
They moved slowly through the kitchen, the dining room, and then into a spacious living room. One entire wall was books, many of them her own. Glass sliding doors at the far end led to a terrace filled with fancy garden furniture and a shiny black grill.
"Look at all your books. I'm very impressed. You wrote all of these? Foreign editions, too. You do any translations yourself?" "Of course you don't. Americans speak only English."
Kasim pulled up sharply on the leash, and Mrs. Olson fell over onto her side.
"Don't move from there. Stay. I have work to do. Clues to plant. Even you are a clue, Mrs. Tess Olson. Have you figured it out yet? Solved the mystery?"
He quickly set up the living room just the way he wanted it. Then he returned to the woman who hadn't moved, and who seemed to be getting her part down now.
"Is that you? In this picture?"
he asked suddenly, with surprise in his voice.
"It is you."
Kasim prodded her chin with his foot to get her to look. A large oil portrait hung above the ornately scrolled sofa. It showed Tess Olson in a long silver gown, her hand resting on a polished round table with an elaborate floral arrangement. The face was austere, full of unearned pride.
"It doesn't look like you. You're prettier in real life. Sexier without any clothes," he said. "Now outside, onto the terrace. You're going to be a very famous lady. I promise. Your fans are waiting."
Chapter 5.
After another strong pull on the leash, Tess Olson struggled to her feet, then put her arms out, finally gaining some balance, so that she could walk at least. Everything about this felt so unreal. Trembling, she backed her way onto the terrace until the iron railing caught the small of her back. Her whole body shivered. 12 stories below, rush-hour traffic was crawling along Connecticut Avenue. Pedestrians, hundreds of them, navigated the sidewalks, most of them with their heads down, unaware of what was happening up in the Riverwalk towers. It was perfect symbolism for life in Washington, D.C. Yusef Kasim reached out and tore the tape off the woman's mouth.
"Now scream," he said. "Scream like you mean it. Scream like you are terrified out of your mind. I want them to hear you in Virginia, in Ohio, in California."
But the woman spoke to him instead, spoke in a barely intelligible rush.
"Please, you don't have to do this. I can help you. I have a lot of money. You can take anything you want from the apartment. I have a safe inside in the second bedroom. Please, just tell me."
"What I want, Mrs. Tess Olson," Kasim said, and held the barrel of a gun up to one of the diamond studs in her ears,
"is for you to scream. Very, very loud. Right now. On cue, as it were. Do you follow me? It's a simple instruction. Scream."
But her scream came out as little more than a sob, a pitiful whimper that was swallowed up in the wind.
"Fine,"
Kasim said, and grabbed the woman's bare legs.
"We'll do it your way."
With one powerful hoist, he had her over the railing, hanging upside down. Now the screams came, high and clear as a security alarm going off, and Tess Olson clawed at the air for a handhold that simply didn't exist. The red leash at her neck blew free in the wind like a stream of blood from her jugular.
A nice effect, cinematic,
Kasim thought. Just what he was looking for. All part of the plan. Immediately a crowd began to gather below. People stopped and pointed upward. Some began making cell phone calls. Others used their phones to snap pictures, pornographic ones if they stopped to think about it. Finally, Kasim reeled Tess Olson back in and set her down on the terrace.
You did very well, he told her, his